Welcome to A Date with Darkness podcast, where I will be discussing the impact of hurtful and abusive relationships and how to overcome them so that you can move through your pain and get to the kind of healthy relationships you want, need, and deserve. I'm Dr. Natalie Jones. I'm a licensed psychotherapist based in California. While I hope that you find this podcast educational and informational, please note it should not be substituted for treatment with a licensed mental health professional. Also, due to the nature of the podcast, some of the information presented on the show can be sensitive to some of my listeners, so please note that listener discretion is advised. Hello and welcome to the podcast. Super excited to have you here. I have an excellent guest planned for today's show, Miss Jill Wise, who is a relationship and narcissistic abuse recovery coach. And she and I are going to go over some aspects of narcissistic abuse that I think you guys will find very informative, especially the generational piece about how you experience narcissistic abuse in your family of origin, all the way up into you marry and then you experience the abuse from spouse and then your own children. And so I'm excited to share this interview with you. Hello and welcome to the show, Jill. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for being on the show. So, I'm excited to chat with you today. And for people who may not be familiar with you, can you tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and the passion behind your work?
Yes, I can. My name is Jill Wise. My social media is called the Enlightened Target. I am a lifelong survivor of narcissistic abuse. My father is a malignant narcissist, and I married a malignant narcissist and have a child with him.
Hmm.
So, pretty much any experience with narcissistic abuse I've been exposed to. And I turned that into my calling and my career. And now I coach people all over the world and hopefully help them heal and get their life going in the right direction.
Okay, thank you for that. Wow, you've had quite the experience. And Jill, can you tell? I'm familiar with what a malignant narcissist is, but for those who are listening to the show and may need to know, can you tell us a little bit about what that is and what that looks like?
You bet. You bet. Well, narcissism is on a spectrum.
Absolutely.
So you can have something called healthy narcissism. That's a
Mm-hmm.
good thing. We should all have some narcissistic traits. You get up in the spectrum into NPD, which is narcissistic personality disorder. And then
Mm-hmm.
the highest level is what they call malignant narcissism,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes also referred to as the dark triad.
Mm-hmm.
So there's three parts to the personality disorder when they are a malignant narcissist. They will have narcissistic personality disorder. They will have antisocial personality disorder or sociopathy. And they will have, and the last part of the personality disorder is called Machiavellianism. And that's the really manipulative, cunning, and even sadistic component to the personality disorder. So, I
Mm-hmm.
tell my clients who are involved with a malignant narcissist, these people can be very dangerous. It's no
Mm-hmm.
joke when you've gotten yourself involved with somebody like this.
Mm-hmm. What were some of the things that you saw that were the indicators that these people were malignant to you?
Well, well, I didn't know, of course, for a long time, and
Absolutely.
even though and when I was in years of court with my ex-husband, I even got the diagnosis from a forensic court-appointed psychiatrist, and I still didn't know what it was, and didn't nobody
Wow.
really told us. So, well, my father was always uh, violent rage, very short-tempered,
Mm,
very drastically selfish, very, very arrogant, haughty, um, cruel, mean, abusive, in every sense of the word, with the exception of sexual abuse and physical abuse. So I was raised around that, and that was basically my normal. I
Mhm.
I when you're raised in that kind of home life, by the time I started dating, I just, assumed that was par for the course. I really did. And in fact, to a degree, I think, and a lot of people are probably like me out there, to me, as sad as this sounds, to me, love and abuse were two sides of the same coin.
Mhm.
I had, had been abused by my father, and when his rage was over, he'd tell me he loved me. So it's very
Mm.
confusing, and he's raged ever since I can remember, ever, in
Mm.
terrible rages. And then I found myself and walked right in to a marriage with one, and
Mhm.
had a child with him. And it became apparently clear within like 18 months,
Wow.
that I had made a serious, serious mistake,
Mm.
and that I had to try and get my son and I out of this situation. And after I got the divorce, he fought me for divorce for 3 years until I paid him off, essentially. And then he proceeded
Mm.
to keep me in family court for the next 15 years.
Mm.
On my son's 14th birthday, he and I lived in South Carolina. My ex-husband lived in Missouri, and he ended up driving to South Carolina on my son's 14th birthday and coerced him into leaving with him, and he kidnapped him while I was still sleeping, slashing my tires and cutting my brake line,
Wow.
and had crossed state lines before I woke up. So I had to come
Mm.
back to Missouri and fight him. So it's, you know, nothing fun about these relationships, dangerous individuals.
Mhm. Mhm, and that's quite common. As a matter of fact, I saw a story yesterday where a little boy, well, he was a man now, he was applying for college, and it was coming back that his social security wasn't matching. And
Mm.
it turned out that it wasn't matching in his college application because his father had kidnapped him from his mother. And he, that father
Right
ended up
there.
going to prison, but, that is very common, where child abduction and things like that happen, because people just want that control, and it's not like they're going to necessarily always be the super involved and loving parent that they portray themselves to be. It's just that they want control.
Yeah, yeah, it's absolutely power and control. Power
Mhm.
and control. My son got a trust fund, a little small trust fund from my family around that time. And I mean, literally like 2 or 3 days later, he kidnapped him.
Mm,
So,
mm,
from my aspects, most of my ex-husband's attraction to me has been financial. But so
mm.
lots of times, and you've got to include that also. Many people don't know that that's also,
Yes,
in the category for domestic violence if you're being financially abused. And it's important,
absolutely.
important for people to understand
Absolutely.
what happens. Yeah.
What were some of the symptoms that you were experiencing as a result of being in these abusive relationships? Do you remember some of the things that you can look back on and say, "Oh man, this is how I know I was really going through some abusive stuff."
Oh gosh. Yeah. A million of them. Boy, anything I can think of offhand. Um, well, I'll take the last court trial that we had. It
Mhm.
was so, it was so, I'd never seen vengefulness like this.
Mhm.
And his whole entire family got together and would
Mhm.
essentially try to attack me as I came into the courthouse, like before I got into the courtroom, but got into the courthouse. There's all kinds of examples of
Mhm.
just almost like they gang up on you. And some of
Mhm.
them, in fact, a lot of them, that them and their family members are flying monkeys, will gang stalk a victim also.
Mhm.
So they'll bring other participants into it. But the first sign that I really knew something was wrong with my ex-husband was when my son was a baby, and my ex-husband, my little sister was getting married, and my ex-husband wanted to drive the limo that my family had. Anyway, I needed to leave to go get some medication. He then proceeded to tell me I wasn't going anywhere, locked me in the closet. At this
Oh,
time, I called my father, still not really knowing what my dad was, and he came over and there was a fist fight. He locked me outside of our home with our baby in the crib. I'm hysterical crying. He's done, from smear campaigns, years of smear campaigns.
mm-hmm,
It, so much neglect for our son,
mm.
but then proclaiming to be such a admirable father. It's nauseating to me, honestly.
I want to kind of circle back for a moment because you described your father as being very malignant narcissist. What was your mother like?
My mom was what I would call complete codependent, just
Mm,
very insecure. They met when they were young. They had
mm,
2 kids. They got married. They had 2 kids. And
mm,
then, of course, after most of us know, after you get married, things change drastically. And that's exactly what happened with my mom. And he became physically violent and emotionally and psychologically abusive. She ended up leaving him when I was 1. But she is codependent. I think, there's no doubt in my mind that he targeted her. He was from a wealthy family. She was not.
mm,
She was from the other side of town. And, I think he came down there. Honestly, I think that in fact, I base this on his um, second and third wife as well. I think he targeted them as too. He targets women
mm,
that don't have the finances to fight him,
mm,
that are going to become financially dependent on him,
mm.
because he knows once he gets them financially dependent, that's a really hard situation for anybody to leave.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
Now, you've talked a little bit about like some of the overthinking and just the ruminating that develops as a result of being in narcissistic abuse. Can you talk a little bit about what that looks like and why people ruminate?
Ruminate.
Yeah,
Yeah. So ruminating thoughts are one of the worst consequences of being
absolutely.
narcissistically abused. I ruminated, no joke, for about 3 years. Had no
Yeah.
clue there was a name for it. Didn't know it was destructive. Didn't know it
Mhm.
was because of the abuse. But ruminating thoughts are kind of the traumatized brain's reaction to trying to figure out how this happened. Where
Mhm.
did I go wrong? Where did I miss the red
Mhm.
flags? How could I
Mhm.
have fixed this? You might go over and over and over the betrayal.
Mhm.
And what happens as you continue to have these thoughts, you're fortifying neural pathways in your brain. So then it will become like when you wake up, boom, go right into ruminating. You go to bed, get up, ruminate all day, go to bed. So it's the traumatized brain's way of, I believe, trying to make sense, make some sort of sense out of a situation where there's no
Mm.
logic involved.
Mhm. Mhm. And why is that so harmful?
Ruminating?
Yeah.
Yeah, because, well, for one thing, it can get to the point where it occupies all of your time.
Mhm.
But you're re-traumatizing yourself as well. Every time
Mm.
you think about really go over the trauma again, I think
Mhm.
it's important for people to know you can re-traumatize yourself from your thoughts alone.
Mhm. Can
So,
you talk a little bit about how that works, that sort of re-traumatization from your thoughts alone?
well, I mean, when I can only speak for me, when I would ruminate, I would have physical symptoms. It would
Yeah.
cause me to go in fight, flight, survival mode. When I was in that state, you can't even access the logical part of your brain. And because I have complex post traumatic stress disorder,
Mhm.
many times the ruminations could throw me right into an emotional flashback which are horrible. If anybody,
Mhm.
I'm sure there's lots of listeners that can relate to that. Um,
Absolutely.
Emotional flashbacks are terrible to live through and can last for hours, days or weeks. So you don't want to, if you catch yourself ruminating a lot, I mean, I think some rumination in the beginning is absolutely normal and maybe even healthy. But if it continues, then you need to try and redirect your focus
Mhm.
so that, so you don't end up like me who wasted 3 years doing that, just obsessed about it.
Yeah, and I think that's part of a natural process that people go through, and you're right, it is so re-traumatizing, but almost it in addition to being re-traumatizing, it keeps you very stuck on thinking about the relationship, could've, would've, should've, and that toxic person, and I think it also leaves you very vulnerable for if that person
Oh,
decides to circle back within that time frame that you're sort of obsessively thinking about, then you almost become more of a victim, if that makes sense, because it's like, "Oh gosh, I'm, like, plagued by these thoughts, and now there's some relief that
yeah.
this person is here no matter how poorly they treated you."
Yeah, absolutely. I also think to a degree, ruminating um, can keep the trauma bond alive and
For
well.
sure, for sure.
So it's there's nothing good that can come out of ruminating thoughts, and it definitely keeps your attachment to your abuser, which is the last thing that anybody needs. So
Yeah, I think that's true, and I think in addition to the thoughts, I think just sort of keeping your abuser's presence alive and, like, sort of breathing life into it, like, even, saying their name, talking about them to people, that just sort of keeps them very present and at the forefront of your mind and kind of in that relationship with them still.
still, yeah, stuck in a relationship with them when they've, they've moved on and we're
Eh,
still really struggling. And I have clients, like myself, I have clients that have gotten stuck in that
yes.
for years. And again, that's why it's so important that people understand, traumatized people understand about ruminations
Mm.
and
So,
hopefully be
how
able,
does one sort of redirect their thinking? How does one sort of engage in that redirection? I have
I
some
can tell.
thoughts. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what I did. It was very, very difficult in the beginning.
Mhm.
Um, I almost I got to the point where I told myself, if I don't stop,
Mhm.
this part of my life will never be
Yes.
over.
Mhm.
It will never. So that was some motivation. But in the beginning, it was very difficult. So what I tried to do, one of the things I did, sounds kind of silly, but I made a bucket list. So I'm thinking, well, I'm going to try and keep my focus present or future focused. So I made a
Mhm.
bucket list of all the things I want to do or accomplish or whatever, travel to. And
Mhm.
each time I caught myself ruminating, I had another thought or other ideas to go to. So I didn't even have to really think about it. And each time you can kind of redirect your focus is a good thing. And it'll make the next time a little easier. And it's a slow
Yeah.
process, but you can do it.
I love that. I love that sort of engaging in the redirection, but I would agree that a good practice to engage in is thought stopping behaviors and just sort of,
But
containing that. Yeah, definitely containing that abuse, but neurologically the brain just goes wild.
yeah, it sure that's me. Oh gosh.
And, it's so funny now that I'm curious to know what your thoughts are. I'm not sure how long you've been separated from the abuse.
I have been no contact since 2014.
What are your thoughts now around your abusers?
Well, let's see. My father, that's a hard one, and although I would never break no contact with
Mm,
him, Um,
Mm.
I still love my dad.
Mhm.
There's an element that I feel for him or others with this disorder.
Mhm.
This isn't anything anyone would want to have. However, that does not make an excuse to be subjected to the abuse or make it okay or make it something that anybody should be exposed to because they're your parent or because you still love them. You can love someone from far away and not have any contact with him. As far as how I feel for my ex-husband, that's a little different, because of the trauma that he's caused to my son. I've had a much more difficult time,
Mm.
getting over that just because the um, terror and the trauma that he has put our child through.
Mm.
So it's hard. I try not to think about him very very often
Sure.
as but um, I try to for me, I think, and this is a very personal thing, I'll just say up front, but for me, I did have to get to some place of some type of forgiveness, or at least
Absolutely.
an understanding that things couldn't be any different. I couldn't go back in time and rewrite history as much as I wanted to, as much as, I tried to. The past was there. It wasn't ever going to change. And I had to learn to live with this and function somehow and start building a new life for myself.
Mhm.
'Cause I lost everything. I mean, I
Mm.
lost my home, my
Oh,
retirement,
wow.
everything. I started over with a mattress on the floor.
Wow.
So yeah, I lost everything paying my legal fees. Um, yeah.
I can only imagine. And can you talk a little bit about, well, I feel like there's a starting over that happens twice, right? With the men, someone that you were once married to and the father of your child, but also with your father of origin. Can you talk to me a little bit about the, rebuilding, or what sort of takes place after you go no contact with your father?
Uh, After I went no contact with him, excuse me. Um, well, at first and foremost, there was some peace finally. Although I
Mm,
still jumped every time my phone rang or had a reaction every time the
mm,
doorbell went off or somebody rattled on my doorknob. After like, I don't know, maybe a month of no contact, I'm like, wow, this is the first time in my life I haven't been frightened or terrified that he could come
mm,
over here, that he could do something, that I had to hide or run away or, whatever, because I was always on guard for him. You never knew when he would show up, when and the way he looked at it essentially was we were his daughters, and it was almost like that was his right to abuse us whenever he felt like it. And when he
mm,
was done, when he was finished with his rage, he used to always say to us, "Go wash your face," because we had been crying so hysterically. And I knew
mm,
what that meant. That meant this is over. Go get it together, and we're going to pretend like none of this ever happened, even though the house looked like a tornado went through it.
mhm,
Um, so going no contact, in especially in the beginning and even now, um, oh, the peace of it all is wonderful, and I can be who I am, learning who the authentic me is,
mhm,
not the person they conditioned me to be, not the
mhm.
person they groomed me to be or told me I had to be, but me. For the first time, I don't feel like it's building a new you. What I felt like more like my healing was after no contact, it was like an unearthing of the authentic me.
Absolutely.
And it was, there's a lot of beauty in that. And
Mm,
taking my life back. and going
Mm-hmm.
no contact and saying, you're not doing this to me one more day.
Yeah.
It's over.
Good for you. Was there some difference? And I imagine that there was, when you decided that with your ex-husband in terms of that rebuilding process.
Well, when we got divorced, no, because we didn't stay married that long, honestly. So it was a short marriage. And even though he kept me in court for a long time, I didn't know what was wrong with him. I knew something was seriously wrong. And that's why I wanted to move my son and myself out of state. I didn't know, but I knew would not be good if we stayed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that rebuilding wasn't as hard. Now, after this last court battle that he got me into, that was the legal abuse that goes along with this for so many of us who have children with one of these people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that can traumatize you in ways that you just can't imagine. I mean, having to sit there, he represented himself.
Oh
So I
boy.
had to answer, questions to him,
Mm-hmm.
while his whole entire family sat in the bleachers and tried to basically intimidate me
Mm.
and, make faces and all kinds and scare me or intimidate me. Um, that process, I was in real bad shape after that for a real long time, a really long time.
Mm.
I had
Yeah.
been, yeah,
A spectacle, it sounds like. It was just sort of being made a spectacle and sort of being exposed to that, and I'm sure, if you're a spectacle, but he's also representing himself, that he's abusing you as much as he can legally, and there's
absolutely.
not a lot that you can do about it.
There's not in the courts,
Yeah.
Um, it's unfortunate too because it was that the traumatization that comes from that is, and along with the financial
Mhm.
losses that we take, spending 15 years in family court should be a crime, you know.
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
my judge, I have no respect at all for that man. He did not enforce any of his court orders all throughout my son's life. So
Mm.
the parenting plan would have been better use made of toilet paper. He didn't he
Wow.
my ex-husband broke the rules, broke the laws, did anything he want, and he was never ever held accountable. And so as the years went on, when I would try and get help or getting reprimanded for, all kinds of different things that he did, I got no help from the court. And parents need to understand, if they're in a situation like I was in family courts, we are unable to parent our children, especially if alienation has been started,
Mhm.
which my
Mhm.
son had become severely alienated from me. So
Mm.
severe category.
Wow.
You cannot parent without the active involvement of the court. It's impossible because so you're going to need the restraining orders for both you and the child. You're going to need, and if they're unwilling to do that, like they were in my case, it puts you in real danger. It puts your child in danger, because in my case, he was being abused, horrifically abused, psychologically and emotionally abused by both his father and my own. So ironically enough, those two, um, ganged up together, and my father helped try and get my ex-husband custody. So I made the mistake when I finally started figuring this out, when my son was returned to me after spending a month with his dad in the summer. He came home and his behavior was so alarming. I thought, okay, whatever this is, I don't know what it is, but whatever it is, I'm going to get to the bottom of it.
What did you notice?
Oh, well, the disrespect for me, for starters. whole
Wow.
new vocabulary of words for me.
Mm.
All kinds of things. He'll do what he wants, and I don't answer to you, and so on
Oh
and so
boy.
forth. 12, 13-year-old boy.
Mhm.
So I knew at that point, whatever this is happening to him. Um, when I figured it out, it became apparent that not only my ex-husband had this, but my father did too. And a lot of your listeners out there will figure that out too. If you've gotten involved with a
Mm.
narcissistic man or woman, you take a look back to your childhood and see we
Absolutely.
a lot of times we repeat the cycle. So you'd think that wouldn't happen, but it happens quite often.
Mhm.
A lot of us have been narcissistically abused as children. And again,
Absolutely.
that's our familiar, that's our normal. And so I hope through my story, I can help others know things long before I did. Had we been educated and as young adults, how differently our lives could have been.
Absolutely. And you touched on something that I think a lot of people really struggle with that are parents, and not just the parental alienation, but also the fact of when your child starts to emulate the narcissistic tendencies that are modeled to them and sort of programmed into their brain. Um, I'm curious how you responded to that. I mean, because now, I almost feel like to a certain degree that once once it's in there, it's almost too late, especially if they're adolescents or older adolescents. It's already started this pattern.
That's absolutely true. I mean, it was clear my son was turning into this. There's no doubt about it.
Mhm.
Um, but I acted quickly, and I ended up, and I had to get him somewhere safe. So I got help from a therapist in
Mhm.
Charleston, South Carolina. She
Oh,
got
good
me
for
in
you.
contact with a educational placement center, and I had my son put in a wilderness program in Georgia where nobody could find him.
Mhm.
And from that point, when that was over, he moved to another school on top of a mountain in Asheville, North Carolina. But that gave me a year and I got a court order so they couldn't engage with him. And that gave me a year to kind of indoctrinate him and
Mhm.
get the authentic child back. Now, when he was exposed to him right after that, it all came back. It all came back. So it's that part of it is so hard for parents. I feel for any parent going through
Mhm.
that and dealing with narcissistic traits
Yeah.
in kids. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, it's pretty much, it's very hard if not impossible, by a certain age and depending on the amount of, again, conditioning, but once that sort of sets in, what's that been like for you now being a parent to him? With the age that he is now, do you still feel like you see those traits from him, or do you feel like that's what's your relationship with him like now?
Well, we're very good now. Now,
Good.
not that there's not a long way of healing to go, because
Mhm.
there is. He knows what's happened. He's going to be 22 on Monday.
Nice.
So, but he's aware of what happened. He knows he doesn't like to talk about it. So, to those parents out there, don't try not to. I know it's you want to talk to him about it, but sometimes it's better to let them in time come to you.
Yeah.
The more I pushed him to try and get answers, the more he distanced himself from me. So I had to
Wow.
let it go. Um, and
Mm.
I had to understand that he wanted a relationship with his father. Although he had done all these things to me, I had to continue to try and, maintain some composure for him having a relationship with his dad.
Do you think he has a better relationship with his father than he does with you due to the parental alienation?
Well, certainly during the alienation he did, but
Mhm.
after my ex-husband didn't win, custody, he essentially abandoned him again. So, this was all about getting even with me.
Yeah.
It had nothing to do with wanting our son. So my son was, and I knew that was gonna happen. Narcissistic parents
Mm.
really don't want, s really wanna, raise their children, spend
Absolutely not.
their
Yeah.
life.
Absolutely not.
The things that a good parent has to do. So, yeah, he abandoned him again, and which was great because then we were able to rebond. I actually took my son to see a parental alienation subspecialist in New York City after that. Her name's Linda Gottlieb. And that was a big help too. So, but
Mhm.
but we're good. We go to dinner probably twice a week. We talk on the phone every day. Things are from when he was in the severely alienated from me. There were times I had to lock myself in the bathroom from him for up to 5 hours. Um, while he's
Wow.
on the phone with his dad telling him what he needs to do to me, and all kinds of really horrible behavior that he had never ever shown signs of that before. This long exposure to his dad. So
Let me
it's a
ask you this. I mean, and I asked you about the effects of parental alienation on his part. What about on your part? Do you still struggle with any
uh,
of that still to this day?
I think that's probably in the whole parental alienation field, the
It
targeted
is.
trauma is the
It
least
is.
spoken about and the least
Yeah,
stood. And that's why when we come in and we are so irate and scared and frightened and determined and we want action taken, they look at us like we're either crazy or
absolutely.
we're unstable, whatever. They don't realize we've been subjected to a form of terrorism.
Mm,
That's really what it is. I
mhm,
mean, I've got videos of him stalking me. He had my son steal my computers. He do all kinds set my son up to do all kinds of spying and different things,
mm.
which is just heartbreaking. Um, but it's that trauma from the alienation is the most severe and complex
So,
trauma I have ever survived.
how does that impact your ability to have a relationship with your son? How does that play a role in how you show up for him today?
Today is we're pretty good. It took a long time to get there, though. I was angry, understandably so. I was severely traumatized.
Mhm,
I, still was trying to reconcile my cognitive dissonance. I really, even though I saw it, I was in the courtroom, I'm like, this is happening. I'm still like, just kind of, I can't believe this is happening. I just can't believe this is happening. I can't believe they're accusing me of these things. I can't believe they're saying these things about me. I can't imagine. Um, it was just a very surreal experience. But that was the most difficult thing I have ever had to come to terms with.
mm,
I struggled with wanting revenge for a very long time.
mhm,
Um, so I definitely I wanted justice. I felt like
mm,
we deserved it, and so many of us don't ever get it. And when you're we're all stressed out while the narcissist is in court, calm, cool, and collected, saying, he or
mm,
she, whatever the case may be, is crazy, and the child loves me and hates her or him. And seeing your child go through that and have these behaviors towards you
yeah.
for a loving parent is crushing. I mean, just there's nothing worse.
In your mind, what did justice look like?
Him going to prison
Mm,
where he belongs.
mhm.
Yeah, he belongs in prison. And my son knows that too. I mean, my son knows that he belongs in prison.
He
And
agrees with that?
oh yes, yeah, he does. He's
Mm,
frustrated that his dad still hasn't spent any time in jail. So yeah, he definitely thinks it's unfair. He hates the judge. He knows, he was put in the middle of it for all those years when it didn't
mhm,
have to happen that way. And
mhm,
ironically enough, when my money ran out and when we got a judgment 1 month when my money had ran all the way out, then we get a judgment, and it's ironically enough 1 month before my son turns 18.
mm.
So, what they, family courts, you got to be careful. They're
You do.
corrupt too. Your lawyers, everybody that is a money-making machine,
Oh,
and they
yeah.
and exploit people in our situations, and it's horrible.
Mm.
It's horrible.
I can imagine. And as you're kind of going through, or as you have gone through this whole ordeal in court, what was there ever any sort of, looking back on your family of origin, do you feel like there was ever any sort of parental alienation that took place with you all in the middle as well?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. So my father did this to my mother. And he did it to his second wife when they were divorcing. My littlest sister is still alienated. She's grown, but she's to a degree alienated from her mother still to this day. And they
Mm,
got divorced, gosh, 20 years ago at least. So, but yes, this is generational.
yeah.
Um, and I know, that my ex-husband um, was doing some trauma reenactment from his childhood and put this victim, and my child I wasn't a victim of abuse. So I think there's some delusional thinking with the alienating parent.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Project that on to the child. And then you can get, the shared psychotic delusion and all the rest of it. And my son
Mm,
had all of that happening. So yeah, all of it.
that's very scary. Was there ever any sort of fearful component that resulted as a result of him being kidnapped?
Fearful, like maybe,
Of his father, or what could potentially happen?
well, I'm always afraid of his father. I don't
Yeah.
take any chances anymore. So,
Mhm.
and I always worry about my son constantly and what could happen with
Is
his
he
dad.
fearful at all of his father at all?
I think he's more fearful of my father. I
Your
think he's
son is more fearful of your father.
I think so because his dad kind of just gave up. Court was over. The lights weren't on him. It wasn't the big
Yeah.
production anymore on the spotlight.
Yeah.
My father, who was much more present in my son's life than his own father, my son still wants to please him and wants his love and affection, um, but knows what kind of power he has too. Because my dad, when my father is a wealthy man, so when you have that kind of wealth and can financially get all kinds of things accomplished,
Sure.
I think he's afraid of that. Plus, when he sees my son, the rages haven't stopped, even though my father's in his 70s.
Mm.
There's violent outbursts and hours long of narcissistic rage. I don't think I've ever known my dad to not go. I mean, maybe 2 days, 3 days without a rage is about it.
Hmm. Now that you kind of, you've gone through all of that and you've separated yourself from that to as much as you can possibly, do you find that as you continue on your healing journey that you've attracted narcissists in your life still to a certain degree?
Well, Now I've not since, I will tell you this, I have not attracted a narcissist in a very long time. But I've done some serious healing work. Now, before this, that's pretty much all I attracted was
Mm-hmm.
narcissist. And if I'm honest, that was all I was attracted to. I didn't know what it was,
Yeah.
but the first traumatically bonded relationship I had was with my father. So that's what love felt like to me, and
Mm-hmm.
I was addicted to those cycles of abuse. I was addicted to, from the dopamine to the cortisol, all of that stuff you can get.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that feeling, the feeling of establishing a trauma bond, was what to me was meant love.
Yes.
So I had to, when I got out of all of that and got away and got some clarity, I had to really destruct all my core beliefs about that and rebuild them into what is normal. And now I can promise you the last person I would be attracted to is a narcissist at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they probably know it out in the world, and I'm certainly not giving off any vibes that, I'm naive or could be under somebody's spell anytime soon. So no, they haven't been very attracted to me since I've done my some healing work.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that. And do you find that, what do you think about people that continue to attract narcissists after they've gone through or, as they continue to heal? Because I'm sure you've coached clients that to a certain degree continue to still attract.
Right. Well, when it happens, we try and figure it out. First, if he or she is one, we go down the list of red flags.
Mhm.
Excuse me. When typically I use you want to be looking out for the three E's: a lack of empathy, exploitative behavior, and entitled behavior.
Mhm.
You see those three flags, in my opinion, that is run for your life in the other direction.
Mhm.
But yeah, lots of my clients still attract or dealing with it. Um, they've some of them have tried really hard to avoid it. And boy, here they call me and they're like, "Oh, you're not going to believe this." And I'm like, "Oh, I said I would." But you've got to put up boundaries. You've got to learn
Uh-huh.
about this disorder like the back of your hand. You've got to learn how to
Yeah.
detect these. I like my clients to get so good at figuring out who's who that you're not just like, well, there's probably a covert or an overt or a malignant. They
Yeah.
can subcategorize them. There's a communal, there's a spiritual, there's a somatic, there's a cerebral. I mean,
Mhm.
I like them to get just boom, 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 know what
Mhm.
they're doing. And you do that, you heal the inner child. The majority of my clients have um, been narcissistically abused as kids. So that's a big part of it, of not being attracted to another one of these people, is healing
Absolutely.
the child. And of course, boundaries and time, time, and learning
Mm.
to love yourself. Once you start, once you start putting yourself first continually, um, you'll get to the point in your self-love journey where you would never lower your standard again for
Absolutely.
people.
Absolutely. And self-love isn't, or putting yourself first, self-love is not selfish.
Oh, no, no,
It's
no.
also not a quick and easy process. I mean, think
Yeah.
about how many years you spent in a narcissistically abusive relationship. What if you had to total up the number of years, how many would you say?
Um, 43, 44 years of my life was spent in one form or another with a narcissist in a narcissistic relationship. Yeah, a lifetime of it.
Yeah. So it's not quick and easy,
Oh,
you
it's not.
know.
No, no, but it can be done.
It can be done, but it's hard, and it's rewiring your brain, which is kind of, with the overthinking and everything that we've talked about so much of, is It's like reprogramming, evaluating and learning to look at things in a different way, especially if you've been groomed, like you said, from a very early age. I mean, you were basically programmed
Mhm.
from the womb on up. And so that's really deep work.
Yes, it is deep work. It is deep work, and it wasn't fun. And I'll tell you too, I believe this sincerely as far as healing goes for everybody out there. To me, healing is not a destination, it's a lifestyle.
Absolutely.
I incorporate my healing into my everyday life. To this day, I still do all
Mhm.
kinds of things that contribute to my healing. So it's ongoing. As far as I know, there's no cure for complex post-traumatic stress
There is
disorder.
no cure. There's
So,
no cure.
yeah.
What does your healing journey look like now?
Well, working with clients, I try and pay back. Service is really important to me and has
Mhm.
been as helpful as I hope it's been to my clients. They've also
Mhm.
helped me in ways that you can't even imagine.
Mhm.
The other things that I did, like we had talked about, I did a lot of inner child work. I reparented myself. I spent
Mhm.
years doing those things. I still do those, still
Mhm.
incorporate that into my routine. Part of my healing was trying to change my subconscious program, find the toxic core beliefs about myself that were not accurate.
Mhm.
um, Pete Walker's book, Complex Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder from
Mhm.
Surviving to Thriving, I think is a brilliant book,
Mhm.
and did wonders for me. And taking care of myself and loving myself and treating
Absolutely.
myself like I would anybody else I unconditionally love.
Good for
That
you.
was, yeah.
Good for you. So, this has been the most informative conversation with you, Jill. So, for folks that want to connect with you, can you tell us how we can connect with you if there's anything that you are working on and so on and so forth?
Well, I'm working on some courses right now, but if anybody'd like to contact me, you can reach my Instagram or my YouTube channel. It's called the Enlightened Target. I'm also on Facebook.
Mm, I love it. Well, thank you so much. And I'll be sure to post your links down in the show notes. And I thank you so much for, coming on here and giving us such a wealth of information.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Okay, so would love to know what your thoughts are about the interview with Jill. I think she dropped a lot of really key points there and love to know what you thought about it. So please be sure and drop your thoughts down in the comments below. Or if you're on social media, follow us there on social media and drop the comments there as well. And it's been a pleasure talking with you guys. Until next time, you guys take care of yourselves and be well.